morning everyone and good morning Queensland. We've just had our Queensland Disaster Management Committee meeting with my ministers and also from the mayors across the southeast. From the outset, can I say that tragically one further life has been lost. The Commissioner will give further details and we express our deep condolences to the families. Can I say to everyone living in the southeast, we've been briefed by the Bureau this morning, and this weather event is very similar to ex-cyclone Oswald in 2013, and also bears a lot of similarities to ex-tropical cyclone Debbie in 2017. And if everyone can remember, ex-tropical cyclone Debbie went across the coast around Airlie Beach, came down to the southeast, then went into northern New South Wales and ended up in New Zealand. And what we're seeing with this system at the moment is pushing further south down into Logan, the Albert, the Gold Coast, and now we're seeing some of the tragedies unfolding down in northern New South Wales, and our wishes are also extended to people in Lismore at the moment. Can I please say to Queenslanders, especially in the southeast of our state, we've been through a lot together. We've been through a COVID pandemic of 2 years, and now we're going through yet another flood. And many people will have been impacted, not once, not twice, but maybe even 3 times. Even though this flood is not like the 2011 floods, and the Bureau will give you more details, but in 2011 the flood peak in Brisbane was 4.46. The flood peak is 3.85 and now falling. It is still a significant event. And I think everyone would agree, no one has seen this amount of rain in such a short period of time over our entire southeast catchment zone. And I also want to extend my gratitude and thanks to the hundreds, if not thousands, of workers out there, the SES crews, the police, our fireys, our volunteers, all of the council workers. Everybody is doing an unbelievable job. The QFES alone had 1,200 requests for assistance overnight and 113 water rescues around Brisbane, the Gold Coast and Beenleigh. So these are people who are putting their own lives at risk to go and help fellow Queenslanders, and that is a very admirable trait that we have in this state, and one that I am absolutely grateful for. Currently we have 1,544 people in evacuation centres across the southeast, and more are being opened by councils. So the councils gave us a brief today. So please, if you are living in an impacted area and if you cannot remain in your home and you don't have family or close relatives nearby, there are evacuation centres available, so help is there as well. In Gympie, we have about 3,600 homes that have been impacted. In Brisbane, we're estimating there could be up to 15,000 houses that are impacted. And as I said, we're going to be monitoring very closely what happens during the rest of the day. Now, in terms of our drinking water, some good news has just come in that Mount Crosby is back up and running. Even though it's running at a reduced capacity, it is encouraging news. So we'll get an update about water. In relation to transport, all of our trains are not running in the southeast. The trams on the Gold Coast are, but our train system is down. My understanding is that most bus services are suspended, and the Bruce Highway will open later on today. We have over 1,000 schools closed across the southeast, and once again people are heeding the messages and are staying at home during this time. As you can appreciate, there's a lot of water around, and our emergency services need to get to people safely and quickly and respond appropriately, and this is really helping our emergency services, so thank you for doing that. And once again, we would love to have our kids back in school, but it's just not safe to do so at the moment. We'll give further update. The Education Minister will put up later on this afternoon about the situation for schools tomorrow, but we will try to get the schools open as quickly as we can, especially those that aren't impacted by water. So there may still be some school closures as well. We have around 51,000 people without power. As you can see by this is a really big event, and the event is not over. With the Mary River, we saw those really high levels in Gympie. We had Mayor George Seymour on the phone. We now expect Maryborough to peak later on today, and they could be very high levels as well. Then, of course, we're monitoring the Logan and Albert rivers. We're expecting them to peak later on, and we're also putting a watch on Dalby because this system is sort of having an impact out there as well. Then we also have 17 councils have been activated for assistance. So we'll be working very closely with now getting out and doing rapid assessments, which is the next part of our recovery phase. But let's still remember that there are people who are going through this extreme weather event at the moment. So we've also been advised that Defence have 200 personnel ready to go and help as well. So as you can see, this morning's briefing has been very, very comprehensive, and I just want to assure everyone that we are doing everything we can and working with the councils to make sure that everyone is able to respond as quickly as possible. I'll hand over to the Bureau. They'll give more information about the levels in the dams and where the flood impacts are next, so people can start thinking about their plans, and if they live near these river catchment areas that are prone to flooding. And then we've got an update from police and then an update on water supply issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier, and good morning, everyone. Diana Eadie from the Bureau of Meteorology. The most intense rain has now eased for large parts of southeast Queensland. The threat continues for far southern parts of the Gold Coast area and the scenic rim. So please keep updated for any warnings that get issued in those areas. But that really intense rain is now shifting into northeast New South Wales and easing for much of southeast Queensland. That being said, the risk for significant flooding is still very real. For today, I'm going to really be focusing on the Brisbane and Bremer, the Logan and Albert, and providing an update on the Mary and also the Noosa areas as well. So I'll start with the Brisbane and the Bremer rivers. For the Brisbane, we've seen river levels reach 3.85 this morning, and that is now easing. That was reached on the high tide this morning. There's still a lot of water around though, so we could see a secondary peak this evening at around about 8 p.m. At this stage, we're expecting river levels of 3.3 metres. There's another significant peak potentially to occur tomorrow morning on the high tide at approximately 9 a.m. So please make sure that you're keeping updated with the latest warnings for the Brisbane River. Now, at this stage, this peak is below what was experienced since 2011, but certainly the most significant river conditions that we've seen on the river since. For the Bremer, the Ipswich area, we've seen around about 17 metres potentially this afternoon, so significant flooding through those areas as well. I'll now move on to the Logan and Albert. We've seen major flooding around the Bow Desert area along the Logan River. And elsewhere along the Logan, we could see river levels approaching those which were experienced during ex-tropical cyclone Debbie around so the communities around the Logan area, please take heed of that and make sure you're paying attention to those warnings as they get updated. For the Albert, seeing major flooding around the Beenleigh area, and at this stage, those sorts of levels are equivalent, if not exceeding, those experienced during tropical cyclone Oswald in 2013 for those communities. So still very much a real risk of significant flooding for those communities in those areas. I'll move on now to the Mary River, and for Gympie we have seen the flood peak at a level that's above the 1999 level in Gympie. The focus for the attention now as that slowly starts to subside is the Maryborough area, where we could potentially see river levels approaching those which were experienced during tropical cyclone Oswald. That was 10.7 metres for those communities. We're also watching the Noosa area, particularly Tewantin, could see river levels approaching the major level on the high tide this morning. So a lot of significant flooding ongoing. Please make sure that you're across all the warnings that are current. As you can see, there's still a lot of impacts, and the flood situation is still very much real, even though the worst of the rain has now subsided and moved into northeast New South Wales.
Sorry, excuse me, tomorrow morning, what's the high tide expected to be at 9 a.m. in Brisbane?
The high tide forecast for tomorrow morning in Brisbane is expected to be 3.7 metres, just above the major level potentially for the Brisbane area.
Okay, we'll go to State Disaster Coordinator. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Premier. Good morning, everyone. I'll note that the Commissioner will shortly update us on the tragic loss of lives and operations that are currently underway. But can I say, in terms of our overall operation around keeping our community safe, all of those actions that we've taken to evacuate people and get them to safety has worked very effectively, and we have had no loss of life and no persons missing in that sense. All of those persons that have got themselves into trouble have been in places where it's dangerous to be when they shouldn't be there. So the message still for all of us, even though the rain has passed, there will be still water in waterways. It will still be a dangerous environment to stay away from those, and if it's flooded, forget it. So the operation is not over. We remain in very strong response. As we go through today, in particularly areas such as Gympie and parts of Brisbane, we'll get into recovery and we'll do better assessments of how many houses and how many businesses have been actually impacted. So that data will come later. We know with the level that we've seen this morning, we are expecting many thousands of properties to have been impacted in Brisbane. And we know from what's happened in Gympie, there's around 3,600 or over 3,600 properties that we expect to have been impacted in some way. Pardon me. We currently have 1,544 persons in evacuation centres, and there's 36 of them operating across the southeast corner, and that includes 327 in Moreton, 331 persons in Brisbane, 449 in Gympie, and 173 in our Toowoomba area. And there are other areas that are opening, and as we see the day unfold in Logan and the Gold Coast, we may well see increases there. The Premier mentioned the large number of persons without power. The message to everyone is to please be patient. Our authorities are working very hard to restore power, but some may expect some extended outages, and it could take some time to return that to them. As always, if people need assistance, if it's something to do with their house, leaky roofs, 132 500 to SES. Bear in mind there's a high load, I'm sure Commissioner Leach will talk about this. But as always, if anyone's at threat, please ring 000. We'll now turn our focus to Maryborough. So we're expecting a fairly significant peak there. It was around the 10-metre mark in January this year. We're expecting it to be around 2.7 metres or higher. So we're expecting a significant flood there today. So our focus is preparing for that. And certainly as Gympie, the water starts to reside, we're restoring services. And I should mention too that right across the southeast corner we have small communities that have been isolated for some time. So we have a very strong focus on making sure that we get resupply to those people, that we support that. And that has included using air assets, including the ADF, who we're incredibly grateful for their assistance. During the whole in the whole response, we've had over 100 emergency alert campaigns, and that equates to nearly 6.6 million messages that have gone out to our community. Our focus, as you've heard, is now on Logan and the Gold Coast area. We're continually being updated. The message for all of those people in those areas, again, it's a dangerous environment. Please stay safe. If it's flooded, forget it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As you've heard, sadly, we have had a 7th death overnight. A 59-year-old male person swept up in floodwaters at Beams Road at Tygum. We do have a number of other people that we hold grave concerns for. There was reports of a missing vehicle swept into floodwaters at Yatala this morning that we are currently investigating. Also, a male person seen to enter a flooded area to retrieve animals at Goodna last night that we are following up on. As I came in, a report of a missing person also near Esk. And as you would recall, some 2 days ago, a male person had fallen from a vessel in the Brisbane River that we are also following up on. The operational tempo has been absolutely extraordinary over the last couple of days. Over 1,900 jobs in the southeast, calls for service in relation to flood-related matters just in the last 24 hours. It has been an extraordinary response from police, fire, SES, volunteers and even members of the public and our assistance from the ADF. Can I thank the Australian Defence Force for their air assets in particular in the last few days and continuing to assist us as we go into recovery. Please do not be complacent today. Even though the weather system is moving away, it is going into the southeast and the operational tempo remains considerably high in that area. However, there is still a lot of water on the roads. There are so many roads that are cut off in Brisbane alone. I ask that you actually be very, very careful if you have to move around, but if you don't, please stay at home, other than those obviously that need to evacuate. Can I sincerely thank the public over the last few days? This has been a mammoth effort, and with your compliance and your assistance, it's greatly assisted us to do our job. However, as always, heed the warnings, listen to authorities, and as always, if it's flooded, please forget it. Thank you.
Commissioner Leach.
Good morning. Last night was the busiest night of this campaign for Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. We received 2,200 requests for assistance to the State Emergency Service and 113 calls to the Fire and Rescue Service and water-related rescues that were carried out up until 6:30 this morning. But we're currently involved in a number of rescue operations across Brisbane, down through Beenleigh and into the Gold Coast. If I could acknowledge the contribution of our selfless State Emergency Service volunteers and staff who continue to be out in community doing what they can. Also our fire and rescue firefighters trained as swift water technicians, done a terrific job over the last week. We have our rural fire service volunteers standing by to assist with clean-up. As soon as the floodwaters start to recede, our rural fire brigades will be ready to assist with washout operations and helping communities get back on their feet. We've been well supported also by Volunteering Queensland. We've had support offered from the Surf Lifesaving Queensland, who have offered trained volunteers and inflatable boat operators. We've also been contacted by interstate jurisdictions, and we have a number of swiftwater technicians who will join us from Victoria to supplement some of our crews here in Queensland. And they've also offered SES support, damage assessors to assist us in coming days and weeks should be needed. If I could also acknowledge the Australian Defence Force through the disaster assistance to the civil community arrangements. We have 4 helicopters that have been assisting with operations here in southeast Queensland over recent days. But the operations are ongoing. We've got significant activity happening down through the Gold Coast and Beenleigh at the moment. We're continuing to respond to the calls in and around Brisbane. We thank you for your patience. We know this is a difficult time and we're trying to get to you as quick as we can. Please, if you don't need to be on the roads today, stay at home, leave the roads open for residents who do need to get in and out and for first responders to get to the tasks that they need to. Thank you.
Transport, Ms. Bailey.
Thanks, Premier. So we're seeing impacts on the Mount Lindsay Highway. It's cut at Bow Desert Road and Jimboomba. The M1 has a number of exits that are affected, exits 38, 80, 87 and 89 on the southern Gold Coast, so be mindful that some on-ramps, sometimes there's flooding in the underpasses there. We've got 99 Logan roads affected and closed. We've got 53 scenic rim roads that are closed, 116 still in Toowoomba. Cunningham Highway remains cut, and the Dagular Highway remains cut in multiple places. Ipswich motorway outbound is still not serviceable for people. And looking just to update on the Premier's information earlier on, our road crew teams are out assessing the Bruce Highway. They are working very hard to open the Bruce Highway north of Caboolture later today, but it will depend on the assessments there, so we'll keep you informed. We have had a tanker at the port that broke its moorings, but the contingency planning went very well. The tugs that were on tap guided it out safely. There were no issues there beyond its breaking its moorings, and it's now safely anchored outside the port area. Trains, as the Premier outlined, the trains across South East Queensland are suspended at the moment. The assessments have been going on in terms of flooding impacts on the electrical system. We've also had the Wulkuraka rail yards out at Ipswich flooded, so that's where the NGRs are based, so we've got to make assessments about what's available and what we can provide. So we'll have more information soon on that. We'll keep the public informed. It may be that as we come back up with rail services, it may be a reduced timetable, but we'll certainly let people know. Most buses are out across South East Queensland. Check with your bus operator. It's very difficult for drivers to safely get to depots due to how many roads are cut, and of course a lot of the routes are affected by the inability of the buses to get through. On the brighter side, the trams are still running on the Gold Coast, and I understand the ferries are still operating safely at the southern Moreton Bay Islands. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to water. Graham.
Good morning. As it stands, the current level of the South East Queensland water grid is at 97%, and this figure has remained stable now for about 24 hours. Rainfall has significantly eased over the catchment areas of our major dams, such as Wivenhoe, Somerset and North Pine. And if we look at somewhere like Wivenhoe, its rate currently is at 182.9%, as at 8 o'clock this morning. And that started to come off from its peak of about 185% earlier in the morning. As we've discussed at previous briefings, the releases from Wivenhoe will continue for a period, and I will ask Seqwater to come and talk to that shortly. And it is a sign, as we've discussed, that Wivenhoe Dam has been performing as it was designed to do. Somerset Dam stands at 147.1% and North Pine stands at 68.8% currently. As we previously discussed as well, as a result of the rainfall, currently 20 ungated dams are spilling, but all of them are performing in line with expectations. The other thing that's been talked about in terms of drinking water, and as the Premier has mentioned this morning, there is some good news on the front of the Mount Crosby water treatment plant. Both the left bank and the right bank of the water treatment plant are currently operational. They're operating below full capacity, and so the messages we've been giving over the last couple of days asking households to conserve water, we would ask for this period to that conservation message to still be kept in mind, and thank you very much to households who have been heeding that message. I would also say about Mount Crosby a very special thanks to the crews that have been working out there literally day and night to have both of the left and the east and the west bank of the water treatment plant operational as we continue to cope with high turbidity in the water that is coming through there. And this will be a feature for some days yet to come. So thank you to those crews out there, thank you to the water retailers, thank you to the councils who have been working with us on those topics. I also think in the water treatment plant space we have heard good news this morning in terms of the Gympie water treatment plant and the immediate future of getting water back online there. Thank you, Premier. I'll throw it to
Thank you, Graham. Thanks, Premier. Good morning, everyone. Look, I'm just going to talk briefly about a couple of subjects in a little bit more detail. We'll talk a little bit about Wivenhoe Dam. As Graham said, look, the dam has continued to perform as exactly how it was designed to perform. As of last night, we actually saw inflows into Wivenhoe Dam effectively peak. And to give you an idea of a context of the size of the event, as the Premier's been saying, this is an extraordinary event. An extraordinary amount of rainfall that's fallen. Combination of Somerset and Wivenhoe Dam has effectively held back about 2.2 million megalitres of water compared to what we've actually released to date, which is about 150,000. That's just to really demonstrate that that's the dam doing what it's supposed to do. reduce those natural flows. If Wivenhoe Dam wasn't here, certainly the flooding, which unfortunately we're experiencing in Brisbane, certainly would have been worse without the dam. So where are we at in terms of our operation? As I said, those inflows peaked last night. We're now in a position where we can start to consider. Technically, we call it our drain down or drawdown period, where we're effectively look to start emptying that flood compartment. We're able to use most of that flood compartment. We have the luxury, I think I spoke about it a little bit yesterday, about the luxury of having a really large compartment to use. So over the next week, we'll be certainly looking to reduce and, in fact, empty that flood compartment and bring Wivenhoe Dam back to its full supply capacity. Certainly the flows we'll be talking about over the next week will certainly not impact flooding and so well below those sort of impact levels as we move that water out. In terms of water supply, excellent news overnight. As the Premier said, we've managed to increase production through those plants. So at the moment we're producing about 200 megalitres of water, and to give you an idea, we normally can produce about sort of 350. So slowly but surely we'll bring those plants back up. So we certainly continue to encourage South East Queenslanders to conserve water. An interesting stat one of my guys gave me this morning. So since we had that conversation yesterday afternoon and started to ask people to conserve water, we've actually seen a 20% drop off on consumption. So greatly appreciated. We'd love South East Queenslanders to continue to maintain that use over the next few days as we get production up and rolling again at Mount Crosby. Thank you for that.
Can you just explain at what percentage? I think we're at 183% at the moment. At what percentage would we stop those releases?
Okay, look, there's probably a couple of things in that. So as we talked about yesterday, Wivenhoe Dam is it's a dual-purpose dam, drinking water plus flood capacity. The numbers that Graham was talking about was all of the drinking water plus that 180. We've essentially got to move what's in our flood compartment at the moment, that water we've stored to effectively protect Brisbane from greater flooding. We've now got to slowly but surely, in a controlled way, move that and empty that storage, and we'll look to do that over the next 7 days.
What's been the volume of the release in terms of cubic metres per second? What's been the volume of the releases?
On cubic metres, look, I actually haven't got those volumes right now.
We asked
happy
for
to
those yesterday afternoon. You said you would take that on notice.
happy to get those volumes to you. Look, probably the other thing I would say, and I know there's been plenty of comparisons around 2011, and I can appreciate people's concerns about the dam, and I really hope that we've allayed concerns today that the dam is actually doing exactly what it was designed to do. But there is a difference between 2011 and this event, and in fact all extreme events we deal with when managing dams are different. But when you look at the start of this event, Wivenhoe Dam itself was a little over half of its drinking water capacity. So we had that available, plus the full flood storage compartment available, which is in fact double what we're dealing with in drinking water. So a very large space that we had available to manage this event. And that's allowed us to slowly but surely put control releases into the system and allowed us not to exacerbate those flows downstream, and we've been able to do that.
What's the water storage at the moment? Yesterday it was about 50%. What is the storage level at?
So yesterday I think Wivenhoe drinking water storage plus our flood compartment I think was about 169. I think as of an hour or so ago we got up to about 180, a little bit over 180, but that's actually starting to come down. As I said last night, we actually hit that peak inflow into Wivenhoe, and we'll actually start to see those inflows fall away, which lets us get into, as I said, this sort of drawdown strategy that we need to undertake to make sure that we have this flood compartment readily and available, because we completely acknowledge that, and I hope it won't be the case, but we acknowledge we're still in the wet season. So we certainly need to have that fully available.
So Goodna, they're still flooding. Why would you release more water now? Wouldn't you just hold it for a few more days and then start releasing it? Why would you continue releasing it now?
Well, we've continued to do it in controlled releases, so there's been no impact to date. We do have a responsibility to ensure that that flood compartment is available. There is considerable water that's come in. I talked about that 2.2 million megalitres of water that's actually come into the system. We're going to have to move that, a big chunk of that, probably about half of that will need to move, but we will do it with the sorts of flow and flow rates that won't impact on flooding in Brisbane, and we'll be able to do that over that sort of 7-day period.
So it won't exacerbate the existing flood levels, but will it mean that flooding will remain in place for longer, over a longer period of time?
Look, where houses are at the moment and those properties that are flooded, as we bring those levels down, yes, that's the case that some of the houses may, and some properties may have water longer as we bring those levels down.
And how long will that be over the next 7 days?
That's it. So our strategy, which will be sort of confirmed later today, is to release or empty that flood compartment and enable it to be ready for future events over 7 days.
See, some of these people would rather you wait a few days and let the water subside in their houses and then release it a little bit later at a slower rate. Could you not do that?
Oh, look, I think Mother Nature's taught us many things, and Mother Nature can change really quickly. So if we were to get more rain coming in next week, having that storage and that capacity available, as I said, this dam has done its job. It's absolutely protected Brisbane from greater flooding levels that it would have experienced without the dam's operation. We need to ensure that the dam is ready to be able to deal with another event, because things can happen quickly.
Are you anticipating more rain throughout the next 7 days? Or
Sorry?
Are you anticipating more rain over the next 7 days that you need that capacity for?
Look, not significant rain, no. Not significant rain. But as I said, and I think everyone can appreciate this particular event. It came quickly, came very quickly, and so it's. As I said, the vagaries of Mother Nature has taught us many things, and one of the things is that weather patterns can change pretty quickly, and we've got to ensure that dam is ready to do the job that it's done in this event for any future event if we find ourselves in that position.
I might just get the Bureau to come back just to explain this event. If you'd like.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So the Bureau, thank you.
In terms of the rainfall forecast in the days ahead, we're seeing more settled conditions today and continuing into tomorrow. From Wednesday onwards and for the following 5 days, we see a return of the potential for severe thunderstorm activity with the risk of damaging winds, large hail and locally heavy falls. Now, we're not expecting widespread rain as we've seen in this event, but of course with any severe thunderstorm there is the potential that we could see very intense rainfall rates in some localised areas. So again, not expecting the widespread rain that we've seen this time, but people should be aware that there is the potential for severe thunderstorm activity to return to southeast Queensland from Wednesday.
Sorry, question again for Sequoia.
They can stay around later. We've got to get back to other stuff. So if I can just, if there are any other
Will
questions
there be
for
another
me?
briefing, Premier?
Sorry?
Will there be another briefing with all these officials later in the day to
Well-
ask further questions?
Well, that depends on what's happening. This is an evolving situation, so there will be someone who will be coming back to brief you. Yes, there will be someone.
To clarify,
Yes.
so are these dam releases now being done on forecasts?
No, they are looking at the forecast, but also they're looking at what actually is happening on the ground. Let me just put something in perspective for Queenslanders. Back in November last year, Wivenhoe was at 39.2% and the grid was at 54.9%. At that stage, they were looking at water restrictions. So that was back in November. Now, the Wivenhoe increases during that period from over the last few days. Thursday was 58.7%. Friday was 80.6%. Saturday was 142%. Sunday 169.4%. Today was 183.4% at 6:20 a.m. This is an extraordinary weather event. Let me also say, if you look at what's happening with the Mary River, there are incredibly high flood levels in Gympie and Maryborough. If you look at what's happening down in the northern New South Wales, they are having the highest river levels they've ever had in Lismore. This is an extraordinary weather event. Now, in relation to the dam, There is a dam manual that has to be operated, and there will be controlled releases that are the responsibility of SEQ Water. Now, Mr Foster is available to stay here and talk to you about those specifics later. But if there are any other questions relating to the event or anything else we have discussed, I'm more than happy to answer those questions or the officials that are here. As you can appreciate, there is a lot happening still in the southeast, and these people are required to go and deal with emergency and evolving situations.
What's the total estimated cost?
We don't have that. They have to do rapid assessment damages.
Millions, billions? What do you think?
We don't know. They're going to be rapid assessment damages throughout the southeast.
I think the Weather Bureau said earlier the peak we're looking at tomorrow is about 3.7. Correct me if I'm wrong. How long are those types of peaks going to remain in place for in Brisbane?
Yeah, good question. Yeah.
The next significant peak for the Brisbane River is forecast for the high tide tomorrow morning at approximately 9 a.m. There's still a lot of water in the river, but at this stage we're expecting those waters to gradually subside throughout the week. That being said, we could still see flood levels around the moderate level continuing from tomorrow evening and persisting through much of the week.
What does that moderate level roughly look like in terms of metres? Can we talk about that?
So the moderate level is below 3.5, so we'll be seeing continued levels below that, but still seeing significant or impacts associated with that moderate flood level.
How many homes are affected when it is around that 3.5 metre level?
I don't have the exact figures on how many homes would be impacted by that kind of level, but given that it's still a moderate flood level, we're still expecting moderate impacts to persist along the Brisbane River. Again, that will be associated with the high tides. So the larger peaks will be occurring in the morning with a less significant peak, but still a peak nonetheless occurring on the evening high tide.
For those people who have left their homes, should they stay away given that there's going to be the return of thunderstorm activity later in the week, or do you think they can return and start to go home?
I might leave the advice on what actions to take to my colleagues.
I think it's important for everyone to really stay connected and stay aware. There are still advices going out through multiple layers of communication, be they emergency alerts, be they through our severe weather warning system, so mainstream media, social media. People that are in areas that are likely to be impacted will already know that. So be aware of what's happening in your areas. As you've heard from the BOM, we're going to continue to see with the high tides that we have over the coming days increased levels of water. The difficult thing is we don't know exactly where that's going to get until it actually starts to happen. So for instance, this morning we planned up to 4 metres for Brisbane. It hit 3.85. So we're trying to err on the side of caution to do that. So the information will continue to come out for people. I know people will be really, really keen to get back and start cleaning up. That's an obvious thing. So we'll do our rapid damage assessments today. Queensland Reconstruction Authority is already heavily involved in this. The information will come out for people. So the best thing people can do in this really operational response type period is stay connected for that. Now, as everyone's saying and the Premier's trying to say, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the weather. The Bureau have told us we're likely to have thunderstorms. That will depend on where it falls and when it falls and how much falls. So people really need to stay connected around that.
Should they just stay where they are?
Look, people need to be safe first and foremost. So if you're in a place that's not safe, if you're prone to flooding, you really need to make the right decision around what you should be doing at the moment. I'm confident what we're seeing is the worst has been now. The rain has stopped falling. The tides, and that will continue. There's still a lot of water in the system, and we're going to see continued flooding, but it's probably not going to be as bad as what we've already seen.
Mr. Palaszczuk, just to be clear, because there's a lot of people who are living here in southeast Queensland that weren't in 2011. If you are in a situation where your house is flooded, you shouldn't be going in to assess the damage until you get the all clear from emergency.
Look, absolutely. We've already mentioned that there's 51,000 places without customers without power. A lot of that has been turned off because it's such a dangerous environment where we've got floodwaters. People should not go into floodwaters. They should not go into floodwaters. They should wait till the floodwaters recede before they go into it, irrespective of whether it's home or not. It's been disappointing, and we're seeing imagery all the time, thank you, media publishing it, of people in boats, on surfboards, on kayaks going into floodwaters because they think it's a bit of a lark. It is not a lark. Let the authorities do what they've got to do the assessments and keep yourself safe and stay out of floodwaters.
But at this stage, it sounds like this water is going to linger for longer than last time. So are people going to be living in these conditions for a long time?
I don't think it's lingering. I think what you're going to see is peaks and troughs. The water will come up with the high tide and it will go down. That will depend on how much overall water is in the system. We will update you constantly around what's happening. It's an evolving situation. We have to assess it real time. You know, that's why the emergency alerts go out real time when they know what's going to happen. We have to wait to see what's going to happen before we can give the correct advice. So we'll continue to do that.
Emergency alerts, we're hearing a lot of feedback from residents saying by the time they got the emergency alert, it was simply too late. Their houses were already flooded.
Yeah, look, as I said, it's part of a range of things that need to happen in terms of advice to our community. So there's advice through mainstream media, there's advice through social media, there's advice through emergency alerts. They are the most technically challenging part that we have to do, particularly in a big area like Brisbane. It's somewhat more simple in low populations areas. When we get to somewhere like Brisbane to do an emergency alert, to get it right, to target the area it has to happen, we have to be very precise because otherwise it overwhelms the system, and in fact the system went out this morning. There was too much pressure on the system because of what was happening in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales, and it went offline at 6:25 and it came back on about an hour later because of the volume.
Does that mean that some people did not get alerts?
No, everyone would have got alerts. What I'm saying is it's part of a series of communications that people get to tell them what's aware. Do not rely on one source of information. Not everyone even has a mobile phone, of course. We've got the whole population here. That's why it comes in through multiple avenues. And those people that live in those flood-prone areas actually have an obligation to understand what might happen in their areas.
But for a lot of people, despair has now turned to anger. Premier, Saturday afternoon, you dismissed it. You were so dismissive when people were saying this is a concern. And you said
No, that's not true. That's not true. Look, we have always said that this is an extreme weather event. In Parliament, we were talking about that. However, the Bureau predictions were rapidly changing because we were under the Bureau. You can talk to the Bureau. They said that they thought conditions were easing. In fact, that system stayed over the southeast. Now, I think it's worthwhile for people to actually hear from the Bureau about the levels of rainfall we got in the last 24 hours, just to give you a snapshot of the unpredictable nature of this weather system. Now, I've been through Cyclone Debbie, ex-tropical cyclone Oswald. I was actually in Townsville. We actually flew in through monsoonal conditions into Townsville. And if everyone can remember what happened in Townsville, it actually sat over the city and over the dam, but it was a longer period of time. What happened here was that everyone expected the conditions to ease, but they didn't. And this rain bomb stayed over the entire southeast, and it had a big impact on the catchments and the streams and everything that went into the southeast of our state. Now, that is unpredictable. No one, not even the Bureau, saw that coming. So what's happened is it has been a huge response effort. Usually we're dealing with issues dealing with one council or a couple of councils. This has been all of the councils in South East having to deal with this issue at the same time. It has been fast and it has been furious and it has had a big impact. That is the facts. Now, in terms of the rainfall, I might just get Diana to come back because a snapshot, we've been seeing these maps at these briefings. They are a sea of red, which means high extreme rainfall. Now, I don't know about everyone else, but last night it was like cyclonic conditions outside. The winds, the rain. Now, that is, and we had 2 systems of thunderstorms merging last night as well, and during the course of the day. We didn't know that was going to happen. This is Mother Nature. I can't control Mother Nature. The people of this state can't control Mother Nature. And sometimes they throw stuff at us and we've got to deal with it. And all of these emergency services people have been on the front line doing the best they possibly can. And if it wasn't for them, there would have been a lot more loss of life. So we should be thanking them from the bottom of our hearts for everything they've been doing. But I really do want people to understand how much rainfall has come into these catchments and across the entire southeast. So, Diana, if you could just explain that.
Aside, what do you say to Queenslanders who are angry that they've been flooded again, saying there was 10 years to plan for another event like this?
Look, I think it's tough on everybody. It is absolutely tough. It's heartbreaking. I go into people's homes and see it. It is absolutely heartbreaking, but it is Mother Nature.
What about the dam controls? Do you think the dam manuals need to be changed to allow for controlled releases based on forecasts?
They were updated after the Commission of Inquiry. There was a commission of inquiry that went through all of that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow the dam people to stay behind and give the media a thorough briefing about this. But please, let's hear from the Bureau, because they've never seen this before. And if they've never seen it before, you can't expect the officials to have seen it before either. Diana? Thank you.
Some of the rainfall totals that we've seen over the course of this event have been approaching rainfall totals that we would normally expect over the course of a year. One example of this is Mount Glorious, where we've seen 1.5 metres of rain recorded over this week. The average rainfall for that particular location is 1,600 millimetres approximately. And we've seen similar conditions across all of southeast Queensland. A number of locations have recorded in excess of 700 millimetres in periods of 24 hours. So the significance of this event can't be understated, just how much rain has fallen over a large number of catchments across southeast Queensland. And that's why we're seeing such significant and continued dangerous conditions on our rivers right now. I spoke in more detail earlier about the Bremer, the Brisbane, the Logan Albert, the Mary and the Noosa. So still very much a dangerous situation with the potential of damage to property and loss of life. So please, if I can draw your attention back to the warnings that are in place at the moment, this is still a very significant situation after an extraordinary volume of rain across southeast Queensland.
When did the Bureau first tell the government there would be a severe weather event impacting the southeast?
The potential for a heavy rainfall event was communicated through a number of different avenues, including briefings and proactive media from around Tuesday onwards in particular, and communication to local councils. In terms of the magnitude and longevity of this event, with any sort of low pressure system, it's quite dynamic, and so forecasts need to be updated accordingly as new information comes to light.
But the government was aware from Tuesday that there was the potential for significant rainfalls. Is that correct?
We began to do briefings from around Tuesday onwards to talk about the potential for very heavy rainfall. In terms of the detail around exactly which areas were most at risk and how long the rain would continue, that came more into line as we drew closer to the event, and that's when we started issuing flood watches initially, but then severe weather warnings, and used severe thunderstorms to illustrate areas as those intense rain bands came through, and flood warnings were issued appropriately as well, both based on the forecast, but also as we started to see rain hit the ground.
Can somebody, I'm not sure who wants to answer, explain if there was warnings of potential rainfall from Tuesday, why did those releases only start on Friday? And why were they so restricted?
We've got to get these people back in and do their
Okay. And finally, I'll just say this. On Thursday, the information was on Friday conditions were easing. And then it changed on Friday. Then the conditions were going to be easing on Saturday. Then they didn't ease. Then the conditions were going to be easing on Sunday. So this is what we've had to be dealing with, a rapidly evolving situation. The Bureau's trying to do their best. The police are trying to do their best. I'm quite sure the media are trying to do their best. This was an unpredictable event. Unpredictable rain bomb over the entire southeast Queensland. And I thank Queenslanders for the great job that they are doing, and together we'll get through this together.
Do you not think that in the future there should be some precautionary releases when there is significant rainfall predicted for the region?
Let me say again, in November, we were looking at water restrictions in southeast Queensland.
And Tuesday,
water
you
restrictions.
were looking at heavy rainfall.
No, and then on Tuesday, Thursday, it was 58.7%. No one could have reasonably foreseen that in 3 or 4 days, and in some areas you got 1 year's worth of rainfall in 1 to 2 days. Okay, we have to go and do some more work. Thanks everyone. Thanks for your time.